Hello again, welcome to RP-0 America. So I just wanted to quickly show the tech here. So I'm researching basic capsules instead of basic solids. Ultimately, basic solids just keeps getting pushed to the bottom of the list because it's 20 science, so it takes a long time to research, and there just always seems to be something better. Like basic capsules will allow me to complete a whole bunch of lucrative contracts, and I'm starting to lose more and more cash here for a number of reasons. So I'm going to try to put the first Atlas into orbit. Let's see if it succeeds. It's going to have a really light payload launch. So it's, I've named it Score. So I believe the first actual Atlas, I think it might have been an Atlas D, to be put in orbit was with a communications satellite, kind of a test to see if it, they could control it and effectively put it into orbit, because it's certainly a pretty powerful rocket compared to anything that came before it. And so that's what I'm representing here with the Atlas Score. Oh darn, I didn't warp to morning, did I? I might have to... Oh no, I did. Fair enough. Just my screen was a little dim, so it didn't stick in my brain. All right. So I've got some research. You can see here, actually at least a couple of the engines I switched over to the Dash 5 version of the engines, which are what ends up being used in the Mercury Atlas program. So they have a little less research, it looks like, but and same with the LR-105. So I switched them all over to the 5. So basically a bunch of the data from the research and flight I've done with the previous ones gets carried over. Currently it's set to 50%, and yeah, that's about it. It gets transferred over once the first time you fly, like right now, that's when it was calculated, how much research I have here. So now any research, anything I do with the Dash 3 version of either isn't going to be transferred to this version, just the one-time transfer from the old line to the new line. As you upgrade things, that's certainly worth considering. So if you're still considering and flying older versions of the engine and you're looking to get good tech transfer, then you definitely don't want to switch over early. Alright, so I'm just going to launch it here. We're using all the engines. It looks like all of them lit, which is, I think, a first for us, which is excellent. Off to a good start. It's not a very large payload. I kind of threw an avionics unit in it, and it's not quite efficient enough to survive as long as it should. But I think the real Atlas Score survived in orbit for 12 days. And it was, certainly more powerful than a number of satellites that came before it, but I can't say for certain if it was the most powerful satellite at that time. And I'm not going to have it controlled by program, or at least not, this launch. Let's see. Going across there. Sorry, I just need to pay attention because I haven't done a lot of hand launches in a bit, but so far it looks like none of the engines have failed. No error messages. Oh, this window must have went away. Maybe it didn't get saved. Enable the flight HUD. I definitely want that. I want all of that. I believe I threw a new science experiment on this because I did do a simulation flight and found that I did want to get something. I believe I picked up a couple of contracts as well. Of course, I have to scroll through all these crew contracts. That'll be nice once I actually perform my first crew contract. Those go away. Still haven't hit max Q yet. So it's a pretty light payload. The heaviest thing that I'm aware that the Atlas on its own put into orbit was the Mercury, the crewed capsule, which is like about 1.5 tons, I think, if I recall correctly. Yeah, I think that's about right. Maybe a little less than that. So let's see. Position a satellite. So I accepted a contract. There we go, NS. So that's really the one contract I'm hoping to complete with this, if it succeeds. Let's see, there we go. So we passed dynamic pressure. So this will be the potentially the first ascent into orbit with this new launch system, which would be excellent. Both gaining more data with these new engines, and basically kind of lock in the fact that we've got this new capability, we've got a new launcher that's capable of getting to orbit, and we can start doing new and interesting things with it. Like, once we have the crewed capsules ability, we'd be able to put actual humans into orbit and using it with other upper stages. So I'm hoping to, for the second half of this video, construct the Atlas Agena-A, which I believe it was flown a couple times, not very many times, but just to increase the amount of reliability we have for our Agena engines. And also to complete that contract that I just kind of skimmed past. There's a polar contract which popped up perfectly. I may as well describe that if this is going fairly well. Oh, I need to drop the booster stage. Could have potentially dropped it earlier, but I don't think I'm going to be hurting for delta V. So I just want to point out, if you go back a few seconds, you'll see this number changed substantially during that. So it's really hard to kind of design. Just in the VAB, normally you can just, if you want to get something in orbit, build something up until you have 9,500 or so delta V. But if you have an Atlas first stage, you can't do that, because how much delta V you actually end up getting from it is in part dependent on when you drop that booster stage. And there's no way to tell MechJeb, I plan to drop it 2 minutes, 8 seconds in. You'd have to kind of throw together a table of your own to calculate that. But that works okay for me. I like this stage and a half design, so that's just a downside based on the tools that KSP has to offer for planning. Let me pitch up a little bit so I can see about 2.5 minutes left of burn if the stage continues through, and my time to apo isn't quite, it's less than that. So that should be a good position to hold. If I hold position, it's interesting, there's something about, because the Earth keeps moving below me, so you'll see this pitch gradually increase. Little bit by little bit, even though I've told it to hold position. Also, and I'm going to want it to bring it down. There we go. Yeah, the Agena upper stage isn't the most capable upper stage at all, the Agena-A. It has a really short burn time because the engine is kind of overpowered for it. Like I said, it's really a test bed. So I was trying to think of missions to do with it, or whether I should just jump to the Agena B/D, to a longer burn time, more powerful Atlas Agena. And I decided to hopefully search, and I did find some polar contracts. So I've got some science here. I can transmit that, it looks like, which is nice. So polar orbit contracts, which I don't think are going to show up in this view. Oh, there it is. So there's that purple orbit. So that, which I'll show off with the contract later, it's kind of a medium Earth orbit, which we should be able to reach with that Agena, but I'll still have to do some simulations. But in this video, I intend to build that actual craft to hopefully use the what do I call them, the sub-assemblies, to take my Agena and take my Atlas and bring them together, because that's really what allows me to do this series, because an Atlas is an Atlas is an Atlas, like until you start using stretch tanks, and same with and I don't want to create a new kind of Agena-A from scratch each time. I want to be able to reuse my craft file for it, because for a number of reasons, it gives me the same price, gives me the same capabilities. It's much more like the historical process where they would kind of create a stage and you'd keep reusing that design for a number of flights, and just basically you're using new parts but gaining more information and knowledge about how they function and making them more successful. By that time to AP, weird, so that time just went crazy, but that's because I'm pretty close to AP. And I shut off my engine a little early there. I could have left it a little longer. Obviously I still have tons of delta V, but I wanted to be at least vaguely close to the actual score orbit, which doesn't get too high. It doesn't have a crazy high apoapsis. I think it was 1200 or 1600. So let me just pop that off. And I believe historically, there we go, it didn't separate from the rocket, but I could be incorrect about that. And so when I did the test, I thought it was funny that it also appears to have not separated here. Technically it has separated from the base, it's just there wasn't much, or it separated from something. There just wasn't much of a bump when that happened. Oh, and there's more new science. See, I've unlocked this new gravity scanner with a recent technology. And that recent technology will also allow me to use other RCS fuels, which I'll show off in my later Agena, my Agena B or D. If I'm super tight for cash, beyond this polar contract and some other ones, then I might just do some other flights to the moon, either crash into the moon for a first time or do some more close approach contracts, because those pay pretty well and I find them interesting. And so that's like kind of a good way to make a video, to get some cash for the career, and to get more reliability in engines. So I can just do some flybys. But yeah, I've got this payload in orbit. It might be kind of the heaviest low Earth orbit thing I put in orbit potentially, but I just threw this avionics package so I'd be able to control it. But yeah, so if I just, does it? I'm trying to remember if avionics packages consume power when you're away from them. Also, I want to see, yeah, it's not a modern enough avionics package that I can turn it off, well, or toggle power. No, that button's not working. I'm not sure why it's even there. But yeah, I threw a new experiment on it. I threw a couple of solar panels on it just to see how effective they are. Of course, they're currently really not pointed at the sun at all. But they're just these early panels that can only output a very small amount of power, even if they were in direct exposure of the sun. So I might come back to this, farm a little more science off of this, because in practice I did give it enough power to survive for 4 days. But for the video, I'm going to go back to the ground, and I'm going to try to quickly throw together the, to use my what do you call them, sub-assemblies to create an Atlas Agena. So that early Agena, it's not the most useful upper stage, other than being a test bed. Like the Agena-B/D, like a larger upper stage with the Atlas, is very capable. There's a lot you can do with it in practice. It doesn't look like much compared to a lot of the later stuff, but really, you know, in a history series like this, the capabilities of a lot of these things don't seem impressive unless you realize that the first time these things are being done. So let me go to show off. First, I'm going to show off the contract I selected. So it's a perfect contract for this because it's, you know, kind of a medium orbit, you know, not that high, but not the lowest low Earth orbit, Apo and Perry, and it's a polar contract, and it pays out not too bad. It lasts a long time, so it's a really good contract for me to select, and then I'll probably also be able to complete some kind of sounding rocket contract to go with it. Okay. So let me go throw together the Agena Atlas. Luckily we still have a good bit of memory here. I just did a restart, just opening this after a bit of time of not having it open. So hopefully I can construct something with the sub-assemblies. This is definitely a video I want people to get out soonish, so people can explain to me how better to make use of sub-assemblies. So as a start, I think I just need to throw something in as a start, so I'm just going to throw in something so I have a root part before I can use sub-assemblies. Correct me if I'm wrong. So sub-assemblies, I want the Agena-A, so I created that sub-assembly a while ago, I'm pretty sure live in a video. So it has that engine at the bottom now. That's where the attachment point is, so okay, so I'll attach it that way. And then I will, like it was just a crazy mash that how I threw this together in my my test, my pre-video testing. So let me try to change the root part. Nope, that didn't work. Select another part to attach by. Weird, it's not even replying. So what is currently the root part? It's not this anymore. Is it that engine? Maybe. Oh, here, let me remove the shroud. I definitely don't want that ugly shroud. Okay, so is it that? No, it's not the engine, so maybe it's the tank I selected. Okay, fair enough. Can I put this in here? Good, all the nodes exist. So I want to make this kind of dummy payload. Select that base, then yay, good. All right, so good. I got that to be the root part. Weird, did I make a clone of that? Okay, so I haven't lost any nodes or anything. That's kind of an issue I often have with sub-assemblies. I'm just going to use this as a filler divider because I actually want to make kind of a fairing to cover up this Agena. In practice, that's how it should be. It'll be a lot more clean and nice when I'm using the FASA for the Agena-D, the larger stretched one. Okay, yeah, ouch. All right, let me quickly kill that. There we go. All right. So yeah, I just threw this in as a filler. Where was I? So here, let me grab my Atlas subassembly. Sorry, I got distracted. Atlas D. So I believe I redid this so the connector is at the top. Good. Will it let me grab from there? It will. Good. So far, oh, so good. Yeah, once I can use the FASA one, it'll look a lot nicer. There we go. So I've got it all together. I've got a nice dummy payload up here, so there we go. subassemblies successfully used. So I was able to reuse the craft file for the Atlas that I created, just kind of off screen, just pretty quickly, pretty easily, same as I did before for this, and throw in the subassemblies. So I'm just going to save this as kind of a dummy payload. And oh, right, I wanted to quickly show. So switch to. So a lot of the real fuel displays can only be, can most easily be seen through the action group, so that's how I traditionally do it. So for instance, if I right-click, you can also see it that way. So let me just see if there's a new display info in here. Oh, of course it's kind of blurred out by the white background. No. This should, from what I was told, I've got a newer version of TestFlight, and I thought this should show the burn time of the engines, but I'm not seeing it in there, so I'll have to check into that and make sure I've got an updated version. But what I can show is the tech that I just unlocked and that I'm not using gives me new options for RCS fuels that are way more efficient that I won't be using on this vehicle, but I will be using on my my Atlas, my Agena-A. So I could use high test peroxide. Here, let me rotate it so hopefully it can be made out on the background. Let's do it there. So right now I've got, so tech level 1. So right now I'm using nitrogen with an ISP that is crappy, just 53 ISP, which is really bad. So now I have the access to high test peroxide, which has an ISP of 128, so double that, or hydrazine, which is even more than that, which is amazing. The one thing with hydrazine, or possibly with high test peroxide as well, is you need to use a service module tank. Like that to contain it. So not every fuel can be contained in every type of tank, and you don't start the game with every type of tank. So there's a little bit of weirdness and progression as you go through those. But yeah, I think that's all I wanted to show with it. I've successfully got my, here, let me just name and save this craft file. So let's see, Atlas Agena-A. So just kind of like a prototype file there while I come up with a payload for it. I'll put something in it. I'm not quite sure what. Maybe if I can support enough mass with it. One of the very few things that was flown with this craft like this in reality with the Atlas and the Agena-A upper stage was the Discoverer mission, I think. It's one of the very early spy satellite missions. So they would have also put a payload into a polar orbit like this and tried to return it. So I might try to build, I might build something that will try to return. I might try to steal my old one as a subassembly. We'll see if that works, because I've done that already using the Thor. I'm not sure if it was Thor Able or Thor Agena, but I have placed something in orbit and brought it back, which was nice. And so I might go to grab that, create a subassembly, and throw that same thing in here, because if I can reuse a re-entry vehicle, that's awesome too. So thanks for watching. So next video I will be probably flying this beast. So Atlas is now behaving nicely. On its own, it could put something relatively small into orbit, but if you pair it with an upper stage, it can put even more mass into orbit. And as you may recall from our previous flight of this craft, it has the ability to run, it has the ability to relight, and this mission we'll be trying to create complete a polar orbital mission where we put something into a specified orbit, not just me throwing something into an orbit that I'm telling you is polar, but the contract actually says put it into this specific orbit. So we'll be trying to target that specific, position in orbit, which will be much trickier than just throwing something into orbit for myself. So thanks for watching. Goodbye.